at Unfold Consulting, and the work that we do really is around building winning cultures. Considering the times that we are in, we felt that this was a pertinent topic, for us to get into a conversation and also to understand. I think a lot of things are evolving. The word new normal is a cliche. I don't think we've anyway reached new normal. The times are just unfolding. There's new data, new perspectives, and what we thought would be a couple of months is obviously going to last for a much longer time. So keeping that, thought that it'll be good to really understand how to deal and navigate these times. So the context of the topic is, building the resilience regimen and how do we sort of bounce back. Little bit on the agenda. Sorry, I needed to share my video. Sorry for that. Is that, we'll talk a little bit about the context of the times that we are in. What does it mean? Why resilience is necessary? What makes you resilient? And, how do we manage the stress and anxiety? What are some practical ways, practical tools for managing, ourselves in the context of the times? And of course, hearing real stories shared by, as part of the diverse personal and professional journey. In the whole context where these, in a number of ways, it could be personally, professionally, depending on the impact that we've had. And stress is really, nothing new, right from the time that, it comes from really from our survival instinct to deal with predators, earlier to obviously currently looking at what the predators are perceived threats. And there is a constant demand, whether it's jobs, relationships, technology today, which has of course become overwhelming. And I keep hearing about how many, devices we have to juggle, especially the times that a lot of us are working from home. The ongoing pandemic, which has resulted in obviously adding to, the ways to connect, coordinate, stay, survive or sustain what we are doing today. And a lot of these have resulted in anxieties, either through the lockdown, managing, family, housekeeping, working from home, managing, virtual teams. I think this is the largest work from home intervention that's sort of really happened. And, coming from the background of human resources, we've sort of experimented in multiple contexts to have, make work from home real. But it's always had a checkered and a, blended reality. And this is really the first time that, it's such a large, especially in the knowledge and enable services, where it's possible to work from home. Of course, there are many other industries you cannot work from home, but that's been a dimension. And a whole lot of things that we faced in the past, the locusts, earthquakes, floods, a lot of weather changes, politics. And that's sort of a lot of this we are all trying to assimilate, internalize, and trying to process all of this. And that's sort of creating within us varying levels of anxiety, right? So that's really, a quick in terms of just lining ourselves. And I'm sure a lot of you are facing it in your own ways. And so we wanted to, do our first poll to just quickly check with you that what do you worry about in your current state? Priya, I'd request you to just, start the poll, and for the benefit of the audience, these are some of the options that we are putting out there, in terms of what is your worry factor. Is it long and blurred working hours? Is it remote virtual management? Is it about uncertain career growth or employability prospects, depending on whether you're in a job or have lost a job, or are uncertain about the growth that you're going to see? Managing work and home, worry about dependence, future, financial issues, health risk, I would really recommend everybody. It's a very quick exercise. Do poll. It's fast to do. For us to quickly look at. Our panelists can vote as well. It's quick. Okay, so we are seeing some trending, but we've had just 6 people. Would really request everyone to put in their votes. Okay, so what we see is uncertain career growth or employability prospects. Yes, the whole professional uncertainty, and of course, health risk. The vaccine's really not anywhere, coming out soon. There have been, mixed sort of feedback. Hopefully, something will come. But of course, there's a lot of uncertainty about, our health and the risk that that poses to our own self and family. So thank you for that. And, so with this uncertainty about the future and anxiety about our own health, let's really look at what does then resilience mean to all of us. And this is again going to be a very quick, sort of an activity that I'd like you to just, if you can use the chat window and in a phrase or, a word, just, whatever resilience means to you, if you can just throw it out. Then I just ask Pranish, if you can navigate the chat window and see what people are writing in. Before we sort of define it for you, we'd like to really understand what your definition is. It could be a word, it could be a phrase, leave it to you.
So there is one comment
What do you understand by there's one, yes,
comment that
restoring back to
normalcy.
Restoring back to normalcy. Any other perspectives on what resilience means to you? Ability to recover.
Consistently coping with the situation. Ability to recover swiftly from difficult situations, oblique conditions. Return to the original form. And that sounds absolutely physically correct. Resilience is the ability to tide through difficult times with a positive mindset.
Yeah, good one. Yes, absolutely. And I don't know if this is the Sanjukta that I know. Name is very familiar. Absolutely. So, it is the ability to deal with adversity. And, also we, heard the phrase to deal with a positive mindset. And that's really, the cognitive part of our brain in terms of how do we look at things more positively. And we'll actually talk a bit about this, and because that's one of the lenses that we have used to deconstruct resilience for you. Again, it's a very, very complex, this whole topic is extremely complex. We're just going to do it in 35-40 minutes. And the idea, we've sort of connected resilience, which is, in spite of traumatic, stressful, or adverse life events, a person can bounce back. And that's really the attempt. While resilience is our mindset, is our, way and orientation, but how do we bounce back and become psychologically stronger as a result? And that's really going to be the crux for the discussion today. I think we all know about stress, we all know about anxiety, but it's not to really, delve into that, but really about how do we bounce back. But before we get into it, I wanted to sort of expand the definition of resilience in 3 ways. Uh, emotional resilience, right? And emotional resilience is a lot about feeling, in terms of, you face a traumatic event that has obviously an impact on you. The range of emotions that we go through, how we relate to that event. Does that event scar us, or are we able to look beyond it? And that's really the domain of emotional resilience. And why I talk about it, because the next one is psychological resilience, and a lot of people sort of get confused between emotional and psychological. A lot of times we use these words very interchangeably. Psychological resilience is actually a more cognitive approach. So let me sort of, you've had a traumatic event, you've sort of, it's obviously been emotional, you've had an impact, but then our ability to build a positive mindset, to interpret what we've sort of gone through and then take the next steps a lot more objectively, is where the space of psychological resilience. I'll give you another example. So for instance, somebody is giving you negative feedback, right? Either we can get into a shell and feel really bad about the feedback that we've received, if that's not something that we expected, or we look at it as constructive, uh, in a constructive context, and look at why did this feedback come to me? What can I do better next time? And that is really when we have, gone beyond our emotions to cognitively work with, what can we do to move forward. And that is the space of psychological resilience. And of course, physical resilience, the name says itself. But a lot of us, many times our body gives signals, right, about our mental health. And we can get fall sick quite often. We can maybe start, parts of our body can start aching. And that is when our physical resilience sort of comes up. Physically, are we fit enough to cope up with what we are going through? A lot of times it's said that your mental fitness leads to your physical fitness. So your body gives signals. So are we physically fit to really cope up with what we are going through? And that is physically, and we thought we'll expand the definition, because resilience by itself, is probably understood in multiple ways. I'm going to stop here, and there's a little photograph, below the, of someone, looking out of bars. And I'm going to ask Pranesh to build on that, build on this picture and take it further. Pranesh, is he there? Okay. Sorry. So I think he's had a power cut. Okay. So that's a picture of Nelson Mandela. And, for 27 years, he was behind bars. Uh, and his story that he has spoken about, and a lot of you can read it, it's in the public domain, as to what he did so that his spirit didn't get crushed. Uh, and in that story, you actually have all the three shades of emotional resilience, psychological resilience, and physical resilience. Uh, his experiences. Of course, we know him, as a leader. Many of us may not really know what happened during the time that he was behind bars for nearly 27 years, and he emerged as a very strong person and as a leader to lead post his imprisonment. So would recommend reading about him, because what we've discussed on these three types of resilience, or the three ways in which we look at resilience, is very apt. Uh, and this is a quote that I'm fundamentally an optimist, whether that comes from nature or nurture. There's a big debate whether, resilience, are we born resilient, or can we become resilient? And is there a way for us, to become resilient, or there are some people who are just born the same way? They are born much more stronger. They cope with life much stronger. So there must be something in the past, something, there for them. But this debate has been sort of, researched scientifically, and and we have, and the result really shows that while there can be nature, there is definitely nurture which comes into play, and a lot of people can build resilience, as they journey through life. And this is the 2007 academics from London and New York using the fMRI brain imaging scans to examine why is it that humans tend to expect positive events to take place in the future, even when no evidence suggests that this will happen. And this term is called the optimism bias, right? What leads someone to think positively, in the future? And I had sort of spoken about it earlier that, we will link this concept up. And the findings were that the two areas of the brains were more active in participants with a tendency for optimism bias, the amygdala and the rostral anterior cingulate cortex. Of course, we have someone from the medical field with us, Suresh Ramu, and in his panel, if you would like to talk. I'm not from the medical, but this was a very interesting study, and it's also very important for us to understand what gets triggered. And when we talk about nature versus nurture, is there truth that only some people are born resilient? The other was the study of children, that children born or raised in poverty or from troubled family backgrounds. We always, if we like looking at a lot of investigative documentaries or investigative films or murder mysteries, etc., all of that, a number of times you'll see criminals have had a very troubled past, right? They've come from broken families, maybe divorced parents, poverty, extraneous circumstances, and they have taken to the wrong path. But there are enough and more examples that a number of people who have come from these circumstances or situations have also moved to have a fulfilled life. Uh, and largely because they have interpreted their life, built stable relationships, allowed positive energy to take over from the negative past. So there's equal number, and it's not a stereotype that those who come from troubled past will only take, become a criminal or become, unlawful, etc., all of that. But a lot of people have been able to, and that is where the optimism bias or the nurture comes. So both biological and environmental factors are important when it comes to optimism and resilience. So being a complex subject, we've sort of looked at the lens of optimism for today. There are various ways of looking at resilience, and those who are interested in this topic, of course, you can read a lot about it. But we've, in the time given, we thought that, we'll sort of look at that. So Pranish, I think you have joined, so you can take the dialogue further. You had, yes.
Yes.
So I'll move forward. I'll move yeah.
So Martin Seligman wrote about how optimism leads to resilience. So there are 3 P's about it. So the first one is about permanence. So people who are optimistic and therefore have more resilience see the effects of bad events as temporary rather than permanent. This is an important idea. Things that are setbacks, people who are less mature may say, my life is over, I've had such a big setback and I'll never recover from it. While there are people who, when faced with failure, will say that this is not permanent. This is something which is temporary. I'll get over it. I'll be able to deal with it. I'll move on and do something else, or I'll do better next time. I'll succeed once I try again. So this is about looking at things not as permanently gone wrong, but that you can get over it. The next idea about pervasiveness. Okay, they don't let their setbacks affect other parts of their life. if I don't succeed at something, I'm not going to say I'm not good at anything. I'm not good at this. This is something which doesn't seem to work for me. So pervasiveness is about not letting, uh, not being able to make one thing work, not give you a sense of bad feeling about everything else. So it doesn't pervade. It is not something that you are a intelligent person and you are you are
Okay. I think he's genuinely having some trouble with his audio. The third, concept related to this is personalization. So you don't make yourself a victim. I think we have people around us, some who we see, tend to victimize and blame themselves when something bad happens. And a lot of this, while a lot of theories in research build these concepts, but if we convert this into a very practical outlook and look at people around us, we'll see that there are some people who will never internalize or become it's not a victimhood, right? And they would look at it objectively. They would say that it's probably the circumstance, etc., but it's really I'm not to really blame. So that's the third P. When we sort of look at uh, those who have the bias for optimism, and when they have the bias for optimism, how do they look at life? What is their orientation and mindset? And it was very interesting to look at it in 3 Ps. We'll show you a quick video, and this is a very simple video. We bought a video where we'd like you to become a child once again. Look at it from the lens of a child, because sometimes a lot of profound concepts, have some very, very simple, truths to it. And there's no better way of understanding it as a child understands it. So we thought that, this was a, yeah.
Morning, everyone. Who does it look like? It looks like me. That's right. Toy down. Who is the strongest in class? Jeron, come on up, please. I'm going to give Jeron a prop, and he's going to try to knock it off the table. Ready, Jeron? Okay, children, who can tell me what it means to have resilience? Yes, Paige? Resilience means if you make the toy fall down, it'll come back up very, very fast. Very nice.
Okay. As I mentioned, that sometimes, very profound come with very simple explanation, and not better than a child to say that, when you are knocked down, you actually come back, right? And that sort of really brings us to the whole space of, do I feel self-empowered, uh, to really apply, feel positive, in control of myself, despite the fact that there could be a turbulence outside? Do I feel self-empowered and in control to be able to keep bouncing back? Because I think falling down is part of life, but how do we keep bouncing back? Yeah. So, this last segment really is about what can we do about it, and how do we sort of build resilience. Again, we've spoken about emotional, psychological, and physical. So when we want to build our capacity to be more resilient, we have to work at all the three levels, right? It's not just about one factor, because it's a layered sort of phenomena within ourselves to build our mindset. So we have to sort of look at it much more holistically. Uh, One is, of course, through exercise. And we come from a land where yoga was sort of invented, and a lot of the yogic gurus still talk about the fact that how yoga sort of aligns the body and mind. But there are various forms of exercise which can help you mentally, it helps you physically, it can help fight depression. There are exercises to boost memory, to combat stress, and a lot of this, if instead of feeling victimized, if we spend our energy exercising our mind and body, our capacity or capability or ability to become resilient starts increasing, right? So when we become a lot more physically resilient and mentally resilient, then we can sort of cope. Uh, a lot of us are sitting behind our laptops even at home, but it's really important to take an exercise break. And I think today, I generally take breaks and walk my pet every like 3 to 4 hours. Earlier on, I didn't have the luxury when I was actually going out to work, and even that short break of a 20-30 minute walk makes my mind really productive. And I'm sure many of you, if we believe that are in control of our lives, we'll also be able to manage that time and build that schedule to uh, exercise. There are tools like journaling, and journaling or building an activity chart is really to record uh, and express ourselves in writing. For some, there's physical, for some there is mental. And what without, of course, we can't do an activity chart right now in our regular sessions. You'd have told you to, let's quickly make an activity chart, but would like you to take this away and look at it, post the session, or at night, that how do you sort of uh, put your thoughts down, write down your daily activities and record your mood, and record what was your sense of achievement. Many times when we think back in terms of how our day progressed, and do we see the day as gloomy or gray, or were there moments that we were able to master? uh, how were we feeling? And once we write these down, it helps us calibrate ourselves. Journaling or making an activity chart really sort of helps. uh, for many, it could be the art and music. If you like playing an instrument, you like singing, you like listening to music. For a lot of people, that is extremely cathartic. So how do you stay in touch with your alternative self? Recently I moderated a group of very senior leaders for another event. And this lady, she's actually head of a leading banking and a financial institution. And she mentioned and told me that she was learning how to play the drums. And she said that this was something that she always wanted to do, but the constraint of course, traveling to work every day did not allow her. And today, it's a skill that she's using. Of course, she's still quite busy, but she's using this time and opportunity to learn to play the drums. And it was and she's saying that I've sort of broken I'm getting insights, and I've sort of broken certain inhibitions that I had while playing the drums, because drum is a very physical thing. And I don't know how many of you know women drummers. Typically a lot of men play the drums if you see concerts, but for her, it's a very liberating exercise, right? uh, and I won't drain this, but our work, and work context obviously brings in a lot of stress. And we have to sort of reflect on our day, and we have to look at how do we anchor back to our fundamental energy and watch out for any stress or stress factors that we are undergoing, and learn to distinguish between what is urgent and important. When we have to take our work into control, we will have to make certain protocols and a way of working where the work doesn't consume us, but we are in control. And you have to sort of reflect in terms of how do we distinguish, and can we ask for help? And this is a very, very critical statement, and this is one which I'd like to build on, post our second poll, which is a little bit of a fun poll. And I'd like to ask Priya to play it out. It is just to really look at that. We've spoken about a few ways, techniques of relaxing and keeping your mind resilient. Let us sort of look at what do you do and what is your method. So if I could ask Priya, if you could put poll 2. So what is your sweet spot? And that is the sweet spot that you need to anchor to and make it part of your routine, because when you do this, your mind opens up. So are we aware of our sweet spots? What makes us feel comfortable? What gives us a good, puts a smile on our face? Again, a very quick poll. Just request you to quickly respond. Could we have some quick votes? I think these are all activities, one or the other, that I'm sure you're engaging with. Okay. There's no one who wants to vote. Okay. We can end this poll and move forward. Oh, okay. It's all distributed. Okay. So it's distributed across all of this, and that's good to know. So as long as you know what your sweet spot is, I think I'm having a little bit of a time lag in seeing the results. So I thought there was no votes. But for those of you who can see, there are, across we've had some votes. This is what I wanted to, sort of really end the conversation when we said that it's okay to ask for help. During this time or situation, and especially sometimes we are in predictable uncertainties, sometimes we are in unpredictable uncertainties because we don't know how to deal, and it's okay to build a support network. And again, in a lot of conversations that I've been having, a lot of people have been using a bouncing board, whether a professional network or a personal network, and if things are really bad, to go and ask for qualified or certified help. And that's where the counselors and therapists come if you really feel you're not able to cope with the situation. But the first two, professional and personal, are very, very representative of those who can quickly help you to bounce back, help you to see perspective. And what is very important for us to know that there are times when we need to share, where we need to learn from others, and we need to be very open. We may not have all the solutions, and we may need to be open for it. So, the conversation that we really have now going forward really is to look at that. how does resilience build a growth mindset? Ultimately, the conversation that we are having, or the concept that we deconstructed, was to really lead to the fact that uh, with with an evolving world, and we were in VUCA times, which was the last few years we've been hearing the volatile, uncertain uh, world, and today we are again in a lot more uncertain, with this pandemic being a unique event. But we have to still grow, we have to adapt, we have to be creative, and we have to innovate. We have to be able to move forward and evolve as individuals, maybe pivot our businesses, uh, reskill, upskill, constantly evolve, and fundamentally grow as an individual. And there is a difference between having a fixed mindset when we are stuck, and but when the factors change, if we are not adaptable or flexible to move with the factors, then learning stops, we stop growing. And that sort of brings me really to the next part of the conversation that I'm really looking forward to hearing from the panelists that we have today, who've been sort of waiting patiently, to talk about the growth mindset, uh, both personally and professionally, and in their different professions and the industries that they belong to. How is resilience going to really be a differentiating factor? And I'd like to introduce Sunil David, uh, Regional Director of IoT, AT&T, Suresh Ramu, co-founder and CEO of SiteCare Hospitals, and Shashidhar Akhihebel, Vice President Product from Zozo Day. So it's a pleasure to have all the three panelists today, and to build the next leg of the conversation. I'd like to keep it informal, so I'm going to stop sharing, the deck, and I'm going to sort of request them to, in 30 seconds, to just introduce themselves. They all come from diverse backgrounds. So 30 seconds to introduce. Sunil, you could go first. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Pooja, and thank you for the opportunity to be part of this panel. Good afternoon, everyone, all those who have joined us virtually. So I'm Sunil David. I am responsible for the overall IoT strategy for AT&T in India and the ASEAN region. So in my role, I work very closely with our sales teams and making sure that we position our IoT capabilities to our customers. I work very closely with our partners. We are trying to build a good partner ecosystem. And I'm also responsible for a lot of the business development and marketing activities for AT&T. Apart from my role with AT&T, I also work with NASSCOM. So I'm enlisted as one of the IoT tech gurus and a mentor for a very big initiative which NASSCOM has, which is to skill women leaders in the digital area. So it's called Women Wizards Rule Tech. So I work very closely with NASSCOM on that. I've done a couple of sessions for about 300 odd women in this area. Pleasure to be part of this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunil. Suresh Ramu, over to you for your introduction.
Thank you, Pooja. Thank you, everybody. Good evening. I'm called Ramu. I'm an engineer MBA by qualification. I've been in the healthcare and research domain for the last 2 decades. The last 5-6 years, we've been running SiteCare Cancer Hospitals. I'm the co-founder and CEO for it. About 2 decades of work in the clinical research area, largely. So we also run a clinical trials company. Have interests in health tech, and growth opportunities in India. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel today.
Thank you. And I know we have 3 people, we have Sunil and, Shashi from the technology background. I think I'll just share a little bit about comes from quintiles, so technology, and not just a medical professional who's working with the hospital. So he's brought in a lot of interesting, innovative, and value driven perspectives in how to lead and manage a hospital. So what is very interesting, while he's chosen the medical but he's come from a very diverse background. I thought I'll just add that, because a lot of people do have a stereotype for healthcare. But yes, great. And Shashi, yes.
Hello everyone,
Over to you.
I am called Shashi. I head a series of products at Zozoday. Zozoday is in the business of motivation, and primarily Zozoday is a rewards management as well as a motivation employee engagement company. I had a set of products that is meant for the sales teams as well as all the partners, where motivation is primarily through rewards, right, based on performance, right? And these times have been very interesting, particularly for my product, and I would like to talk more about it. But it's mostly about how things are done in the new circumstance, and that's what is very interested me in also learning from varied from other panelists as well as from you, Pooja. So it's a great session to start with. I'm looking forward for all the learnings and as well as my 2 cents to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shashi. So really the first question, is to, since we are talking about resilience, and that's really, the concept that we'd like to build forward, is the last 6 months, there's been a journey for all of you personally and professionally. So what has been some of your strategy, the lessons that you've learned, and what does then resilience mean to you? If you can, talk about this at an individual level, and we'll of course deconstruct it at an organizational level. But the first question really is at a more personal, individual, because we are human beings. We work is one of the contexts, but we have so many other contexts. So Shashi, I think since you're right now, the highlight is on you. We begin with you, and then I'll go around the. Yeah.
Sure. So one thing that immediately comes to my mind when I talk about the current situation personally is that this is one of the few times when people would not say, including me, as why is this happening to me? Because it's happening to everybody around you, right? So this is one of the special circumstances that is not truly unique to you, but everybody on the planet almost is getting affected. So this is very different from I would not even call it as an adversity, but a different circumstance where there's always a certain personal adversity that if somebody faces, right? For example, death of my grandparents was, I could remember as the, a single most disturbing event that happened to me, say in recent times, right? So when you compare to that, right, this is a different kind of adversity. And the way to cope up with that is mostly to focus on relative things. And that is when if you look at, if I consider this as a important enough adversity to spend my time on as compared to other relatively higher intensity adversities that we have had, or crisis that we have had, then that what helped me to stay focused and say that, yes, this is an issue, but it can certainly be something that we can very quickly recover, right? It started out with the general pain. That's why I'm not going to very specifics about what pains I generally have. This is something that is known to everybody. Everybody has a different degrees of or extents of discomfort, problems that have faced, but the distinction of this particular circumstance is around that it is all pervasive. Everybody is going through this, and everybody more or less has the same level of deviation from their norm, right? That is the highlight. You are deviating from the norm, and that's what can describe the current situation. And for me personally.
Sure. So you've decided to see this in a larger way because it's beyond. It's not something that you did or it's something that's happened to you, but it's connecting everybody in humanity. So you are looking at it a little bit from the big picture, to sort of really be resilient about this and take it in your stride. So, good to have your thoughts. Sunil, your story of the last 6 months, and how have you tried to cope up with the circumstances and the situation?
Right, sure, Pooja. I might take a little more than 2 months because I 2 minutes, sorry, because I have a personal story to share. Okay, so maybe I'll spend a little less time on the other questions, but on this particular question, I just will probably need a little more than 2 minutes. Now, when you talked about the definition of resilience, and while I was preparing for this, I found a very, very nice definition of resilience. It says it's the ability to harness one's inner strength to bounce back from setbacks and to thrive during times of challenge or change. So I found that very interesting. And so while I harness my inner strength, there is also a spiritual dimension to this because I start my day very early. I spend about 40 minutes in the morning meditation. And so that really helps me up and kind of sets me up for the whole day. Now, apart from the drawing of the inner strength and also drawing from the spiritual powers, I think the one thing which the COVID thing has taught me is the need for adapting to the new situation. Because for me, professionally, it was very, very difficult because I'm from a sales and marketing background. And my job entails at least 7 to 8 days of travel every month. So I meet customers, I meet our partners, then I speak at industry events. And for me, it was very difficult to cope with this new reality where I'm kind of stuck to the home, not moving out and collaborating with partners all through virtual means. So that took some time to adapt. But then I kind of got used to it and so kind of reconciled myself to that situation. And it's still not easy because the kind of solutions that we offer to our customers is very capex heavy, Internet of Things, very capex heavy. And because of the COVID situation, companies were constrained from a capex standpoint. They're not willing to spend. And the sales cycles are very long. So that means that I had to be a lot more patient. So that was one professional situation that I had to deal with. But personally, for me, the challenge was I have an autistic son. He's 18 years old. His name is Akshay. Okay, and he was about 2.5 years when we found that he was suffering from autism. And while we are based in Chennai, about almost 2 years back, we actually came and moved to Hyderabad, where my mother-in-law is, because unfortunately, Akshay had a seizure about 2 years back, and because of that, he was under some kind of a medication, and the side effect of that medication was that he was getting very aggressive, very, very aggressive to the point that tolerance levels came down significantly. He was just not patient. At least there were 3 or 4 cell phones which he broke. He broke a TV. So he used to get that those bouts of aggression, and became very difficult to control that. And we thought the best thing to do was to come to Hyderabad because here my mother-in-law is here, and the flat that we stay in, bang opposite that is where my brother-in-law and his sister and 2 sons stay. And he's very fond of my brother-in-law. So we came here about 2 years back, and we've been here. Now, his routine every Saturday and Sunday was like this. Saturday, I have to take him in Hyderabad. I take him to a restaurant and give him a dosa, the famous restaurant called Taj here. That's his Saturday routine. And every Sunday, I take him to a mall. Okay, so I take him to a mall. He has his biryani, he has his ice cream. So that's his routine on a Saturday and Sunday. And on weekdays, I take him for a drive. Now, lockdown was announced on 25th of March. And can you imagine the situation, right? So we're not allowed to go out. We got a special permit from the police to allow us to, go out for a drive only within a certain area. So every evening, I used to take him for the drive. Now, the challenge was the malls were closed. And he wouldn't know what COVID is, right? So we had to tell him that, there's a fever going around in the air. And if you go out, you're going to catch that fever and you'll get, sick. So, that was his understanding, so that's how we had to tell him. And so it was very, very challenging, those 40 odd days till the times the malls were opened. And evening when we were taking him for the drive, he used to see all these shops closed. He was just wondering what on earth is happening. And there were times when he couldn't control his emotions. He started to cry and all that because he just couldn't relate to the situation outside. So that was very, very difficult. And fortunately, what we found is that he was able to, adjust to that situation. And his aggression completely changed, no aggression at all. And 6 months now, since this lockdown, of course, we had the unlock happen in June, malls started to open and we used to take to normal routine and all that. The silver lining for us is that Akshay's behavior is completely transformed. No aggression. His tolerance has improved significantly. There were times, Pooja, when if there's a power cut at home, even though we had an inverter, he wants to go out. He just doesn't want to be at home when the power goes. There were times when I used to take him for a drive at 3 or 4 in the morning. There were times when I used to take him out for a drive at 11 or 12 in the night. We had so many instances of power cut, and we just had to tell him, just wait, Akshay, you're going to, the power will come. Just they're doing some repair. So for me, that situation really completely changed. Akshay is getting better, and for me, I think that was the silver lining. So I just couldn't ask for more, Pooja, when it comes to the
Thank
change in
you,
Akshay's life.
Sunil. I think thank you for sharing such a personal story, and it sort of adds a lot of candor. And of course, it's a great story, and for a child not to really understand what's going on, to the fact that he's transformed, I think would be extremely cathartic. So it's a great personal example. So thank you so much for sharing it, to a live audience. Thank you so much. Mr. Ramu. I don't know why I call you Mr. Ramu, but Ramu, you keep insisting. Yes.
So I think for me, it's always been, it means bounce back, right? Resilience means bounce back, getting up if you're fallen, learn from the past. I think learning is a big part of how I look at resilience. But I think the biggest thing is to convert a challenge into an action-oriented opportunity. I think for me, if we can convert what our current situation is into an action, then we have already moved ahead from the problem that we are facing. I think the mind somehow begins to accept the current state very quickly. If we say, okay, now what do we have to do? I think that's the next question. Saying, what can I do? Is, I think, to me, the way to deal with challenges. Look at life as a series of experiences rather than see successes or failures. And I think somewhere, if you just say there is an experience that I'm going through, then it becomes easier to deal with the current situation. Keeping a focus on the goals, I think, what are we doing this for? Where are we headed? What do I want to achieve? I think we'll also take the problems or the challenges that we see go away, because typically I find ourselves always talking about issues and challenges, and I say, if you figure out why, where do you want to go, then I think a lot of these problems, and if you're still alive, then you definitely have a purpose still in life, right? That's really how I see it. And I think the last 6 months have definitely exposed a lot of us to different kinds of responses to the same situation, essentially. Responses where people don't care, people don't believe, to responses where people are extremely afraid and not willing to move ahead. And I think we have seen a whole range, and we are still seeing the whole range. It's not over yet, and it's going to continue maybe for some time to come. So that is going to be the test really on a lot of us. In the hospital, we run a cancer hospital. This is, you cannot stop operations, and we work here every day, and I come every day. In the beginning, we said, let's try and divide ourselves so that if, we didn't know how this is going to pan out. We didn't have information about how this is going to pan out, what it is going to take, how much it will impact each one of us. And then slowly data started coming in terms of whom it impacts and the comorbidities and all of that, right? So we decided to break ourselves into teams. We said if somebody gets impacted, then the other person at least can continue to run the operations, run the organization, because we have patients who are coming in every day. For them, you have to continue the treatment, and you can't just stop. And cancer will grow if you don't treat it. So for the patients, for everybody in the organization, you have to say that I will come. So I think it was about managing the people, managing the understanding of the different types of people, getting them together, figuring out how to communicate, because this is completely new to any of us in terms of what to say, what not to say, because we don't even have information. So I think it's been a fascinating, I would say, 6-7 months, and definitely something that you've learned from a lot to learn from the last 6 months, which otherwise I think normal if I compare this with 2 years ago, I mean, there were different kinds of learning, but this is an order of magnitude different in that sense. So it's been interesting.
Thank you. And I think you brought in a very good example of psychological resilience, because you've spoken about the fact that, despite of what you're going through, you have to move to the next step. And, we spoke about it, we were deconstructing that we all have our own lens. So psychological resilience is about, interpreting the situation, taking things in your stride, but bouncing back and basically moving forward. So I think that's a great example. And of course, you brought in the fact that, you are, the cancer, hospital, medical care is a big reality. And I know for site care that one of the core values is grit. That's grit is nothing but another term for resilience. And so for the audience today, if you could, share that, how does this value really come to action? And especially, looking at the fact that in a cancer hospital, you're dealing with fatality, you're dealing with terminal illness, you're going to be dealing with a lot of emotions. Patients come in with emotions, their families, members, caregivers who accompany them, come with that. And, how does one deal with that? And both for your clinical and non-clinical functions, workforces, how does the value of grit come alive?
No, I think it's an interesting question. So, we have 5 values within site care. Right is how we spell it. And R for respect, I for integrity, H, I will skip G for a moment, being humane, T for teamwork, and G in many ways is the grit that holds everything together. Because you can have everything, but if you don't have the grit and the follow through, literally, I think the things will fall apart. And it fits so well with the fact that cancer patients and families have to have the grit to bear with the pain, the disease, the growth, the change, the sudden change sometimes. The fact that we have to hold them on for a significant period of time through the life cycle of their treatment. And many of the patients get cured completely, but the treatments could be fairly long drawn. They could be sometimes 6 months, sometimes even a year and a half of treatment, and life changes, and then they have to go back and do well. But it is a significant amount of grit that you need to do that. And I think from an organization perspective, from clinicians or from a delivery service perspective, all of us need that mindset that we are here for that life cycle of the patient's journey. And whether it is staff, I think I do a coffee session with all our new joinees, and it started as a casual talk, and I continue it like that. And I introduce myself, and we do a long introduction of ourselves and talk about our own stories, personal stories, and not just the title and where we came from, but a more deeper kind of story, 5-7 minutes. And we quickly realized, 7-8 people sitting around the room, and we all have our stories. We quickly realized that each one of us has come from different backgrounds, difficult backgrounds very often, and have risen to come to the same place, around the same table. And we're all here for the same cause, to serve cancer patients. And that realization, so to speak, for everybody in the room suddenly happens somewhere along the 1-hour session. That whether it is a nurse or whether it is a very senior manager or anybody else in the organization, all of us have come from extraordinary circumstances to where we are today. And therefore, the path forward for all of us can be something that we can look forward to, but you need the grit to be there and to pursue. So perseverance and passion, right, are the other ways of looking at the same thing. Right? It's just another way of looking at what this means and stands for. So it's helped us a lot. I think it holds us and gives us guidance as to why we're there. The healthcare industry is also peculiar. I mean, there's a huge need, and right now everybody obviously talking about healthcare. So suddenly you become the center of the world almost, which was not true almost 6 months ago. And I think from our perspective, to keep focused on our goals in terms of serving our nearby community, but also extraordinarily focused on cancer treatment, where there may be other opportunities and other things that people are trying to do, was also something that I think was a learning. The trust deficit, if I have one more thing I would say, is that the deficit of trust that exists within healthcare, whether it is between hospitals and doctors and patients and insurance companies and pharma companies and all of that, is something that I think requires enormous patience and perseverance from organizations like ours, which say that we will treat patients the right way. I mean, you have to get the right treatment to the patient. There will be nothing more, nothing less. How do you do that in an environment which fundamentally almost distrusts you? And that requires, I think, a lot of grit and perseverance. And we're still in our journey, so it's still a long way to go.
Absolutely. I think keeping your ethics, and we all have our own, personal perspectives about the medical fraternity, healthcare, but without the grit and resilience, you can't really run a very ethical sort of a practice. And it's kudos to you. Shashi, with Zozo Day, and as a, growing organization of, with this situation also came with its challenges. So as a product leader, how are you building a resilient team? And through your product and services, how are you, providing resilient solutions to your client? I think I'd like to look at it both ways, both internally and externally, in terms of, what you do for clients as well as how do you manage your teams.
Right. So as with any organization, in this particular department or the division of product management, right? Product management is a discipline of solving problems. So product managers typically need to be students of society, understanding users, understanding problems, understanding would a particular user, right? That's a general term that we use in product management, is would a general user or a customer act in a particular way, right? And that actually goes into designing of our product. So what happened in this particular circumstance, when there was a lockdown, people were not able to do things that they generally used to do, it broke a lot of assumptions, right? So went back to the drawing table and basically asked ourselves, are the assumptions that we made about our users, our customers, as they would behave in a particular way, still hold good when most of the things are different, right? So that's one of the key things that we did as an organization is, just hold off for 2 days. That's at the beginning of the lockdown, when all hell broke loose and we said that from tomorrow we're all working from home and we have to start selling, online. You can't go to your customer's place and sell. You can't do user research. You can't do surveys. You can't talk to your users, at a personal level. So then we said that, okay, calm down. Let's do a slow recovery, right? Because it's so ambiguous that we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So let's sit down, talk to one customer and say that, okay, this customer is our representative customer, right? Let's talk to them, find out what is happening, what is their immediate reaction, right? As with any disaster, right? Going by the technical disaster management concepts, right? You follow the 3 R's, right? Which is first rescue, then rehabilitation, and then you rebuild, right? Rescue, relief, and rehabilitation. So rescue is just, you're going on a particular path, somebody has pushed you and you're off the path. Your first instinct is to steady yourself, is to make sure that you are no longer in danger. And that was the first 2 days to 1 week of what we experienced with our typical business, right? It started, from basic questions of answering that, is our business going to survive? Is my product going to be relevant, right? Are my users and my customers going to spend enough such that we get more revenue? So you start with those questions, right? You basically want to just get out of that situation, rescue yourself, go to a safe place. That's the first part. Then when things started to, become slightly clear, relatively clear, that is when you think about how do I get some relief, right? And that is when you set up structures and processes. Okay, we are not going to be able to meet in the office. Let's have a daily scrum call, right? And how many of us have a daily scrum call? 100% of the people have a daily scrum call, right? A daily call, right? Would that happen when you're in office? Probably not, because you kind of have many more instances of talking to your colleagues, talking to your customer, talking to your customer representatives, that is. So you need to have some discipline. So that goes into the relief part. That is when, and then you talk about how do I provision my team so that they are always online? Do they have enough infrastructure to work from home? Are they safe? Because many of our team members are, are bachelors. They rent a house here in Bangalore. Their families are anxious. So how do we set that right is the second part, right? And that is where the HR team comes into the place, and they did a fantastic job to make sure that everything is in place. So we slowly moved from getting rescued to have some relief, right? And that is when you start the third process, which is rehabilitation. That is, you question everything. Now that you're on stable ground, you ask, can you sell over the internet? Answer is yes. We have got a few customers. Can you design products over the internet? Yes. Okay. Then you question some basic assumption. Define a meeting, right? This is one of the things that we did in our daily meetings, right? What is a meeting? Meeting is not a physical meeting, right? It is an opportunity to exchange ideas and take decisions, right? How can you enable that? Okay. Is it necessary to be in the same room? Maybe not, right? So, but given the circumstance, you basically start virtual meetings. You get better at your written communication. You standardize some form of a protocol where you can easily take decisions with the data that you have on hand. And essentially, the rehabilitation part is about focus on the end result, not on the path, right? That is very critical, right? You can, processes break, organization structures break, roles are no longer relevant in that flux, right? So basically, you realign yourself and then focus on the end result. So, so essentially, the dissonance is that it's our inability to define this crisis, okay? Or we define this crisis as the inability to carry on with our life, right? That is what we call as a crisis. But in fact, that is never going to happen, right? Things are always going to change. So I think the realization that the end result is important, not really how you do it, goes a long way in identifying that a new normal will emerge. The new normal doesn't mean your core ideas have changed. It's just that the way to do them has changed, right? So it's going by the same example. When you're walking towards your destination and somebody pushes you and you go off road, you, instead of getting back on the original track, you basically find another road to your target, right? So that's essentially what we are all doing, and then we should basically start to do it. So focus on the coffee and not on the coffee mug, right? So that's what we have to do, right? And second is slightly more philosophical is we do risk management, right? I mean, that's a standard philosophy, the standard practice. Okay, just making a list of all the things that will go wrong, right? But we have this slightly wishful ignorance that we don't plan for something that we don't know, right? I mean, it's not wishful ignorance, but sometimes you don't anticipate that tomorrow you don't need to come to office or you cannot come to office, right? And that is very pertinent to our business, particularly when you're designing products. So I remember one day before the lockdown, right, a prized possession or what was most sought after by everybody in a big city was ability to catch an app-based cab, right? To get an Uber and Ola, I mean, I could see a smile on the faces when you were able to get a cab, right? So now suddenly one day after lockdown, that is no longer relevant. Just imagine, right? The power that an organization which are running app-based taxis, that what they held is no longer relevant. Today, they are some of these companies are operating at 10% of their original capacity, right? That's so when you have such a tectonic shift, right? So that is when you question your basic assumption. Then you basically anticipate adversity, even if I can call that, okay? And the third point is about focusing on the end result. So these were the three things that kind of now it is beginning to emerge as we navigate through these times. So the interesting things that we did was our design team, in fact, sits in a different city, right? And we already had this this process of the virtual meetings already in place. But then the problem was with our, say, the development team, who would come late in the office because their way of operating is that they typically work late into the night. They start at noon and so on, right? So for them, the issue was around the blurred life between their personal space and their office space, right? So it was difficult, and that's something that we encountered 2 or 3 months down the line. Is that it's not possible for some of these people to continue working the way they have. So that is when we have to put certain principles in place, right? And then we said that, first thing you need to do, accept that this is the way you are going to work, right? So, and then we say that the team should have very strict working hours, okay? Should be available at certain moments in the day, absolutely. And other times it is okay, absolutely okay to say that this is my break time and I am not available for this. So if the acceptance is basically there needs to be an acceptance across the team that yes, there are people who will work during certain hours and are not available during certain hours. That's the critical part. The second part to fix this problem was to, of course, prioritize, right? All these may seem like very commonsensical things, but that is when you really apply it, that is when you discover the power of all these points that I'm making. Basically, prioritization. You focus your attention on what is absolutely required right now. That is what we internally are calling it as slow recovery. Think that we don't have to fix everything to get back on track, but do one thing at a time. Have daily wins. Okay. So we had I was talking about the design team and the dev team, right? So a daily win is as simple as if you are able to have minimum number of meetings between the design team and the dev team such that the entire information is conveyed and the design team is equipped to start their work. That is actually a big win in the small context that we operate in right now, right? So these are 3 or 4 things. Yeah,
Yes,
so
I think you very nicely told us that, to be a resilient organization, especially given the pandemic, how questioning the basic assumption, anticipating, something which one hadn't anticipated, and how do you then rebuild for the future. I think that's a great model, when we, sort of try and define how can an organization be resilient. And you've also spoken about the personal protocols, especially for people, working from home and all these, working in these new ways. I'd like to also extend to Sunil, because, he's a passionate advocate of technology and belongs to an organization like AT&T, and, at the scale of operations that your organization is, how are you building, or how is AT&T building the culture of resilience, especially the given times?
Right, Pooja. So when you talk about nurturing resilience, of course, you need the family support. You also need the organization support. And from an AT&T standpoint, one thing which I would like to emphasize is that ever since the pandemic has hit us, the leadership has been very, very supportive. My own manager constantly is in touch with me and all her direct reports, checking on our health, our well-being. And the first and most important dimension being that if you manage the employee experience well, naturally they'll take care of your customers, right? So from that standpoint, I think I can't ask for more. Great support from the leadership, and the focus was more on outcomes delivered, nobody monitoring and checking how many hours of work that I put in. Outcomes is what mattered. We also had a practice where every Friday evening, our managing director has an icebreaker session where we get everybody on a call, and we just don't talk about work. We don't talk about COVID. Everyone just jokes, shares some funny incident, what has happened in that particular week. Kind of very, very informal kind of a session. So that's great. Now, in terms of the kind of tools that I use to engage with some of my colleagues, and of course we are a tech company, so we always have the tools to collaborate and communicate. But of course, the frequency at which the collaboration happened was even more now in the COVID situation, given that we are not able to meet, right? But for me, I also made a very conscious attempt, Pooja, to give back from all what I've learned through all my experiences and learnings. So I've had the opportunity to participate in almost 30 virtual sessions. So I've spoken at a number of colleges in these last few months.
Yes, it was very difficult getting your time.
Yeah, and then I had a chance to deliver 2 talks with the NASCOM program, which I told you about, 3-hour sessions for 300 odd leaders. So for me, it's this whole idea of how do you share your experiences and knowledge, especially with the student community, because as I had the opportunity to deal with so many individuals, entry level people who are students, they were very, very concerned about their future, because of the COVID situation. And I made a very conscious attempt to give them doses of positivity. When I speak, people reach out to me on LinkedIn saying that it was a great talk. Can we chat? So I made that conscious attempt to reach out to them and tell them that, hey, don't worry, and all that stuff, right? So from a knowledge sharing perspective, I think I had the opportunity, and that continues, Pooja. I mean, as and when I learn, I also want to share that with the larger community, especially with the students today, because they lack direction and they really need help now. I've also mentored a few women, especially some of those who attended my NASCOM sessions. They were not too sure how they should proceed. Technology is a very vast subject. They needed help in knowing what exactly they should focus on. So I made sure that I was able to carve out time to help such people. And that was very fulfilling for me, right? And there were also friends of mine who had lost their jobs. And I just wanted to make sure that I reach out to them, and I tried my best possible ways by which I could connect them to the right people so that they can help them get jobs, because a lot of them lost their jobs and many of them have that fear and uncertainty. So I just wanted to make sure that with all the experience that I've got, just connect with people, and also made an attempt to reach out to people who have not contacted them for years. So some of my old friends have not been in touch, just ping them, say that, hey, it's been a long time since we connected. So I did all that, Pooja, in terms of reaching out to the larger community,
And Sunil,
sharing
I think it's a
experiences.
great example. We spoke about that, building a support system. And I think you have given us, an example of how you have reached out to support and try and build that support system for whether it's students, women, people who've lost their jobs. Because one of the things that we discussed earlier was really how it's important to ask for help. Uh, and just to and this is really my last question, and then you'll open it up to the audience, is that when we are talking about resilience, and of course Shashi has spoken about how organizationally, one, you've spoken about how it's important to give back. Ramu spoken about the fact that in a very traumatic environment, how it's important to maintain the right value. But all of this is also to build a growth mindset that we were discussing, that the way the world is evolving, we have to be pivoting, I mean, in our different ways, whether it's in our roles, whether it's in the industries that we work in. Ram also brought in that suddenly healthcare has become really the center of the world. While for all of us, health was important, but today it's become urgent, right? It's become critical. It's not just important, right? So, given so when we look at unfolding our growth mindset, and so as an organization, and Sunil, I'll begin with you and go backwards, is that what are the trends that you are seeing that will shape your organization and industry, and then how do individuals need to really pivot themselves? How do they need to adapt uh, as things keep moving forward? What is the future looking like for you? Yeah.
Right. So I'll first look at from an organization standpoint. So we are a telecom services company, and the one thing which is really important is for companies like us to be willing to come up with innovative business models, because consumer behavior has changed. Right. The traditional method of selling will not apply today. How we reach out to customers is going to be different. There are different channels by which we can engage with customers. So the need for providers like us to come up with very innovative business models, providing products as a service, those become very, very important, so because we'll have to differentiate ourselves from the others. So from an organizational standpoint, the need to be more flexible in terms of coming up with these products and services. That's one. As far as an individual is concerned, I think when you talk about growth mindset, I think one very important dimension is the learning, Pooja. I think one needs to be in that lifelong learning mode. So I make it a point that while I get these opportunities to speak at events, and that makes me prepare, right? I mean, every time I have to speak, there's a lot of preparation that goes behind it. But I also make it a point to attend webinars. If there's something which is very relevant to my area, I make it a point to attend those webinars. I, hear the perspectives from leaders. In fact, I've attended maybe about 100 odd webinars in the last 6 months, and I made notes in about 4 books. So all very important points that I noted down, which I can always refer to if I need help, right? So the need to be in that lifelong learning mode, and I also made an attempt to learn new skills. So, for example, I've enrolled for a course with CI and IIT Madras. They launched a course on data science and Python programming. I have absolutely no software background, but I thought, okay, let me enroll for this course and see how it is, because everybody's talking about data science, everybody's talking about AI. So I just wanted to understand the nuances of this. So I enrolled for that course. So, and in fact, I recommend others also to, because a lot of the tools are free, learning courses, there are a lot of options available. So I think one needs to be in that lifelong learning mode. One can never say that, okay, I've learned enough. There's always technology is changing at a very, very fast pace. So one needs to keep in touch with what is happening. So that's what I would say, Pooja. One constant need to learn, skill, reskill, upskill, and there's no age factor here, right? So I'm in the wrong side of 40, but I still, feel that I need to constantly learn. And I think that would apply to everybody now, Pooja, this whole need for learning.
Absolutely. Uh, Ramu, again, the rapid changes in healthcare and healthcare really becoming the limelight is also creating, I'm sure, a lot of internal pressure. And what does then having a growth mindset mean to you? As your future is evolving, and given the context of where we are, again, as I said, we've been using the word new normal. I don't want to use it because I don't think we have arrived at the new normal yet. We are still in that journey, yeah. So how does what does growth mindset really mean to you and the industry and individuals in your organization? Yes.
A long time ago, somebody said, that if you're not, if there is no growth, then there is really no life. So it is actually very fundamental, I think, in the way even humans or organisms live is they grow. Actually, even if you don't see it physically, that we are becoming taller or whatever, but we're continuously changing. Cells are dying and cells are coming back to life, and new cells are being born. For a sight care, for example, sight is a cell, nothing but taking care of cells. So I think, if at a very fundamental level, life is only possible if you have a mindset of growth, survival. At a very fundamental level, I think we're all already built like that. So we don't really need to change in that sense. I think humans or any organism that is living already understands how to survive, how to, and it's already resilient. I think it's just sometimes the trigger that has to happen that will focus on what are we doing with it. And I think the mindset has to be there for how can I grow, how can I learn, how can I improve, how can I be better than yesterday. A very simple thing that we always talk about in our family is, can we be better than yesterday? And that sounds very easy, but it's not. It's very, very hard to figure out what did we do that was slightly better than yesterday. And exponentially, obviously, this would mean you would have become an extremely better person, or a happier person, or have acquired many more new skills if you're better than yesterday. So it's a simple concept, but quite hard to implement. So I think you've already mentioned some of the tricks and the techniques to do that, including reward management, etc. But one of the things that I personally always think is that you need energy. I think there are challenges in the day, long days. We're all working hard. It's not sometimes very easy. I think everybody's going through new things that they have never done before in their life. Sometimes their entire life of what competencies and skills that they have learned are suddenly not relevant, from at least from a commercial perspective or for earning their revenue or the compensation perspective. So the whole mind is about, can we have the energy to come back, right? What can get us there to come back? And I'm always inspired by the thought that, come back next day morning, come back on Monday morning, and you say, okay, got a phenomenal week ahead, and these are the things I want to do. I think to program ourselves to constantly do that requires certain practices. People have figured various things. I heard some of you speak about, a variety of practices to do that. I think Sunil mentioned meditation, for example, in the morning, which is extremely powerful. Walking, for example, could be extremely powerful. Listening or reading to books. I listen to books a lot more than I read nowadays. But it is important to figure out how you can come back with the highest amount of energy for the next day. And I think that will allow us to continuously think about growth. So I think practices that focus on getting our energy levels back, talking to people that matter or care, that allows us to do that. So I would always tell people, don't manage your time, because everybody works 12 hours, 14 hours a day. I mean, and we get exhausted and all of that. But that's really not the point, isn't it? The point is, how much energy do we have left at the end of the day? For me, my family, my kids, my wife, that's a source of energy, right? I mean, because when you go back home and you get the hugs after a quick shower, before I tell them, hey, don't touch me before I have a shower. And, I think that gives me everything back, right? And in 30 seconds, I'm back on my, with highest amount of energy. So to me, I think the biggest takeaway in growth is, first of all, focus on the goals, but manage your energy levels. I think know about your energy levels and then get back on track.
Great. I think that's a very critical about. It's also about the vibes that we give to others, because a lot of thing about energy is that, is your energy building that aura around you to attract? Because opportunities, as they say, that the world always conspires, if you have the right energy. And a lot of times, while energy is intangible, and we talk a lot about it, we don't know how to measure it, but it's really about being aligned and centered. So thank you so much. I think it's a great perspective, that how do we align our energies to evolve and grow and become a better version of ourselves, step by step. Shashi, the last one from you, for the audience, that a growth mindset, what does it sort of mean for you, and as your industry is evolving, what do you believe, how do you sort of align the mindset of the individual, what is required for where you believe that the industry is going and your organization is going? Yes.
Right. I'll talk from the organization's perspective because from the individual perspective, I think Sunil and Ramu have covered it
Sure.
beautifully. I don't have much to add on that, right? But I'll touch upon certainly on the organization's perspective is that these are times where you have to own the crisis, you have to own the adversity, and you really have to be the change. You have to own the change. What that means is that if you do not conquer and set new standards for your business, your customers, your employees, right, you will be led by the so-called new normal. Now, which means that you basically go and set what new normal is. This is the opportunity. And that's what is going to lead to the next growth, right? Which means if things are not happening in a particular way, okay, and the world has shown us, the circumstance has shown us that that is not the case. Everything can be changed. Now is the time to set standards for your business, or audaciously say that I'm going to set the standard. I'm going to the so-called disrupt that we generally use, right? So we question what is the business that you are in, and how do I do what is best for my user, right? Again, coming from the product perspective, irrespective of whether the current circumstances supports or not, because you have to create those environment where when your users, your customers, your business is going to now recover, they recover to a state that you can guide them to, right, through a set of new business processes, new products, new ideas, innovations. So that is where the focus has to be for at least, I can talk from the perspective of startup or new or early companies like ours and the business like ours, right, where we work with a lot of soft as well as objective things like motivation, incentives, and so on, right? So can you create an incentive structure? Let me give an example of that. Can we create an incentive structure based on the number of meetings, virtual meetings that a salesperson has with his customers, right? Now, nobody tracks it today, or even if they track it, it is not so objective that it can be used as a motivational tool. But we should set standards for that. I mean, that's just an example of what the audacious goals have to be right now, right? You need to set the standards as a company, as an organization. Growth would mean that. Growth would mean that you guide the customer in this age of uncertainty to a better place, right? And that is in fact the guiding light for us that we kind of follow, is that now that all assumptions are shattered, you set the rules. Over to you, Pooja. I think Pooja has dropped off.
Yes, so this is Pranesh. I think we can take a few questions from the audience.
She's back.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Yes.
Shashi had finished speaking, so I thought this was a good time to maybe take a few questions from the
So,
audience.
and I think I wanted to, I think it's a great point about taking charge. I was just about to say that I think taking charge and being able to influence the outcome. The opportunity, Shashi, what you brought in is that we actually have the opportunity now to build a new market. Build a new future, and so we can look at ourselves really the builders of what the new normal will be. And I think that having the growth mindset is to really look at ourselves as really the builders and creators of a new future. So thank you very much. I think all of you have brought in very distinctive points. I'd like to leave now the house open for the audience if there are any questions. You can even share your video, ask the question to any panelist. You can come online, put it in the chat window, any mode, that is, that you're comfortable with. Anyone wants to ask a question? No? Pranesh, do you have any questions for the for the panelists you've been also listening on?
Yes, I actually had one question. Okay, now, this is about coming to the point about what has been the most difficult challenge to deal with during this pandemic period is what I'd like to hear about. And maybe from Mr. Sunil talked about his dealing with his son. I don't know if that was the most difficult, but probably might have been. Mr. Ramu also talks about, you have to keep the work going. You can't stop a cancer treatment. Is this necessarily the most difficult thing you did? Or if you've already spoken about the most difficult, what's the next one? Because hearing the stories about the most difficult challenge you had to deal with in the recent situation is always a learning experience.
So, Pradesh, I'll just take this. I think for me, the most difficult, the challenge that I went through with my son, okay, that was difficult, yes, but then, as I mentioned, the transformation of behavior was the silver lining for us. But for me, the most difficult thing today is the fact that we are dealing with so much of uncertainty. What is certain today is uncertainty, right? So, because a lot of the growth of our business hinges around when this pandemic is going to end. And there's still so much of uncertainty. When is the vaccine going to come out? By the time. So having to deal with that uncertainty, both from an organizational standpoint in terms of our ability to, drive revenues, and even for me personally, because, we are a multinational organization. And, performance obviously the criteria before, they take decisions regarding workforce reduction and all that. So there's always that uncertainty, no matter how much you perform, there's always that uncertainty, next year, this time, will I still have that position? So there's always that fear lurking in one's mind, So I think those are things which I would probably want to, like to share. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, uncertainty is extremely high for everybody. It causes a lot of stress because the future is nothing like what we could have imagined it to be in the past.
Right.
And I think that also resonates with something Shashi told me when we were just having a conversation pre the panel, that while we've been hit by the pandemic, what next? I'm sure that we will be moving to maybe another event, an episode. So we can't say that the pandemic will be the end of it all. And I think Shashi, you want to build on that because you were mentioning it in our conversation.
Yeah, we are going to have another crisis like this. There is no doubt about it. Maybe it happened once in 100 years. Maybe it would not be a pandemic, right? But it would be something that we have not anticipated. But the knowledge that we are going to get hit by something makes us prepared in a different kind of way. Maybe we will not kind of close ourselves in and wait for the crisis to emerge, but it's just the knowledge that yes, things can go bad, right? So it's like we are not waiting for adversity, but we are expecting. Okay, we are not about acceptance. We are saying expect. But I think our generation has stopped expecting it, right? Because we have been blessed, right? I mean, there hasn't been any major event, at least in the past 30, 40 years, that really affected us so much, right? But now that we all know that it is possible, it is going to happen, another so-called black swan event will come up. The fact that you know that there's a black swan event coming in no longer makes it as a black swan, right? I think that is the mindset change that is absolutely necessary right now, right? Particularly among the new generation of population that is coming in, right? Who are used to a different kind of an environment than the previous generation, right? I think that, if that is one thing that we can take away as a big learning, it will lead as a cascading effect into a lot more behavioral and psychological change as to how we even perceive the world, right? And then that automatically leads to resilience.
Yes, very well said.
Absolutely. I think that's really, I don't need to say much to close this.
I just wanted to bring one point here, Pooja, very quickly. Actually, I'm not sure whether you heard of Jaspreet Bindra. He was the former chief digital officer of Mahindra, and I heard him speak a couple of months back. He talked about how an organization needs to build immunity against any kind of pandemic. So today we're dealing with COVID. 1 year later, we really don't know what kind of situation that we might deal with. It could be a pandemic, it could be perhaps a war-like situation, right? So he talked about this whole concept about an immune organization. As an organization, how do you build antibodies? No, we have antibodies that develop an immune response against the virus. So an organization also has to build those antibodies that can fight against any kind of situation, a black swan event or anything else. I think you can probably download that. He's written a book called The Immune Organization, and he listed about 7 different antibodies. Talked about decentralization of work, automation, how do you deal with customers in these kind of difficult times. So maybe you can have a look at it. But I just thought in context of this, bring that.
As Shashi said, that this is a leveler and a lesson which has cut across generations. And when we talk about immune organization, we can talk about all this because this has been a huge learning, and learning how to adapt and maybe cope with another very critical event, which could be as as holistic and as pervasive as this one, is what we are going to come out of this. So thank you so much. I think, this is very engaging. One of the things that, I love, working with panels and leaders like you is that there's so much to learn from each other. And I don't think there's any one formula or any one perspective, that one can say that that's really the only perspective. And thank you so much for your time and building on the conversation and resilience. It's a difficult topic, and we all have our own perspectives and experience, but I think it's the collectivity is what is very enriching for me, and I'm sure it must have been for the audience as well. And it's being I can see it's on live on YouTube, so anybody can watch it. And we'll also request Zozo Day for a link and maybe have the session promoted out. Thank you so much for your time, Ramu, Sunil, and Shashi, and for all the people who participated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.